everybody, and thank you for joining us this morning for this really important conversation. Like Elizabeth said, my name is Teresa McCormick, and I'm the Director of Programs and Healthcare Partnerships here at Second Harvest Heartland. One of the toughest things about tackling hunger today is that many people who are in a position to help simply don't know that there's a problem. And often they're really shocked to learn that hunger is as pervasive and as devastating as it is, even right here in the heart of the Midwest, where there's plenty of food to go around. We're particularly blind to the depth and seriousness of campus hunger. The cliches of subsisting on pizza and ramen really mask the serious and crushing reality of campus hunger. The truth is, more than 20% of four-year and community college students live with hunger every day, and it derails their learning, steals the joy from their college experience, and jeopardizes their post-graduation dreams. Many of these students don't make it through the first year, and far too many don't even set foot on campus to begin their studies because hunger simply gets in the way. And we certainly can't talk about this challenge without talking about COVID, which has made it really tough for college students to work while they study. Think of your job waiting tables or working at the campus movie theater during college. These jobs have disappeared, meaning we can be certain that campus hunger has taken a big jump in the last year. There is some good news, however. College students are now entitled to SNAP benefits, which is a great stabilizer and allows students to stay in school and stay fed. I'm joined this morning by an impressive group of experts, foodies, and educators to help us understand the crisis of campus hunger and the best solutions available. I'm honored to welcome Rebecca Leighton, who spends her days helping students at the University of Minnesota remain fed and housed so they can learn. Welcome, Rebecca. We're also joined by Beth Jones, the executive chef of the University of Minnesota's Campus Club, where she's made local, seasonal, and organic food the menu norm. It's really great to have you, Beth. Lisa Harris is also joining us. Lisa is the Dean of Students at Anoka-Ramsey Community College, and she's joined by her colleague, Nikki Jagodzinski, who is a counselor on that campus. They're here to help us understand the lessons learned from their very proactive approach to the problem of camper hunger. So welcome, everybody. I'm just so appreciative of your time this morning, and let's dig into the conversation. So first, I'm hoping that we can really set the stage a bit more for what hunger looks like on college campuses. So for our panelists who work directly with students looking for assistance, what can you tell us about their circumstances and challenges they're facing, and how does food insecurity play out in their lives? Maybe Nikki, we can start with you.
Sure. Thanks for having us here. Appreciate the conversation. So I would say that on the Anoka-Ramsey campus, we see really a wide range of students that are impacted from food insecurity. It doesn't seem to hit one group or one type of student. It is really across the board, from PSEO students all the way up to non-traditional age students who are raising a family, students who may come from poverty, but more often it's really just students who live by getting by. Like there's just barely enough money to get by, and then they start struggling paying bills and food insecurity and those kinds of issues. And oftentimes students are living in this state of just getting by, and all it takes is one crisis for everything to come tumbling down. A sudden car repair or a medical bill or a cut in job hours. Most students at Anoka-Ramsey do work, I would say, and with COVID, certainly the loss of jobs, like you had said, Teresa, the loss of income or a reduction of hours has greatly impacted people's budgets and ability to pay for food. But the crises can really vary, per student. It might be job loss, it might be medical, it might be something as small as, like I said, a car repair that just sends everything reeling, because when you're living that close to the edge, it doesn't take much, for that to have a big impact. As far as how it plays out in a student's life, it's very difficult to focus on school if you're sitting there in class or even through Zoom class, and you're thinking, okay, I have $50 this week. How am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to get food? How am I going to put gas in my car to go to work? And your mind is just always brainstorming, how do I problem solve this? What am I going to do? How am I going to be okay? It just changes your ability to focus and participate in class, your ability to really comprehend the material that you need to for your classes, as well as just be engaged, in college in the way that we think you should be engaged in college, in the way that you can really experience it to the fullest. It really has an impact on those things. And of course, any long-term crisis that's felt by somebody can impact mental health too. Somebody could really have, symptoms of depression, anxiety that might happen because they're dealing with this constant crisis of barely having enough, and trying to navigate, how do I manage this every single day? So they come to us for help. They come to us, to seek assistance. I'm a counselor on campus, and I work directly with students that are struggling with these kinds of basic needs. And we help connect them to SNAP resources and different opportunities, help that we have on our campus to help students with food insecurity. It's certainly become a growing problem. And since COVID, it's definitely been a bigger problem.
Becca, I see some big head nods. I'm curious to hear what you've been seeing on your campus.
Yeah, I think Nikki really covered it well, what the day-to-day feels like for students, just this chronic stressor about accessing food, and just to provide some broader context for why that's occurring now. I just think oftentimes when we talk about college food insecurity, there's this misconception that it's just, like you mentioned, Teresa, that college students aren't budgeting right, and it's just when you eat pizza for 4 years. But really, college today is much different than it was in the past. In the 1970s and 1980s, you could work in a summer and pay for your full year of tuition, room, and board. And that's just not the reality today. So for example, a student today would have to work 67 hours a week for all 52 weeks of the year just to pay for 9 months of tuition, room, and board at a public 4-year institution in Minnesota, like the U of M. And financially just hasn't kept pace with that. So we're just asking something very differently of students and families today than we were in the past. So it's just this is a result of a broader problem and not just a result of students not knowing how to budget their dollars.
That's really powerful to hear, Becca. Thank you for sharing. I am, particularly interested in how your campuses have responded. Certainly I think COVID has just done a huge underline to this existing challenge around food insecurity. So, how did your response to student hunger start, and what's changed since the pandemic began? Maybe Beth and Rebecca, you guys want to jump in?
Yeah, Beth, I could just provide a little background about our existing resources, and then I'd love for you to talk about our newest partnership. But our campus has been running our campus food pantry for almost 4 years now, and we've been leading, my background's in public health, so our public health approach to addressing this issue and trying to prevent students from needing these resources in the first place and trying to help them meet their basic needs before these crises happen that Nikki was talking about. So we have our campus food pantry. We have a meal sharing program with meal swipes where students can donate their extra meal swipes. We've partnered recently and have a mobile food shelf that comes to our St. Paul campus, which is really great. And then Beth, why don't you tell the story about our latest partnership?
Yeah, so I had heard about Becca probably 2 years ago. We had a colleague who ran the student organic farm that kind of put us in contact with one another. And for years, I had been trying to figure out a way to get our, we don't have a lot of leftovers at the campus club. We try to make what we need, and but I had been trying to figure out like timing for how to get leftovers to the Nutritious You food pantry, and for various reasons, it just hadn't coordinated time-wise. But when COVID hit, I knew that the campus club was going to be closed between Thanksgiving and Martin Luther King Day. And I just to have that huge kitchen sitting idle was kind of ridiculous. So I reached out to a friend who worked at Second Harvest And she put me in touch with Emily Paul, who was also a friend. I hadn't realized she had taken over running Minnesota Central Kitchen. So it was all these people I already knew, and the campus club got set up to start making meals for Minnesota Central Kitchen. And then I asked if there had been any connection between the Nutritious You Food Pantry and Second Harvest. And that's kind of when this connection happened. So we started in early November making meals for the food distributions on campus, which are literally right downstairs from the campus club kitchen in Kaufman Union. So we've been, it kind of alternates weekly how many meals we make. The last week we gave out 300 meals, and you know, this is restaurant quality food. We're getting amazing food from local producers, BIPOC farmers. Last week we sent out trout from Red Lake Fisheries. So it's really good, healthy meals that I think really help out for students who are just in a time crunch. It's hard to, you know, balance all these things we have going on in life and then stop and think about what am I going to make for dinner. So so it's worked out to be such a great partnership. It's reemployed my staff and me for, you know, we're getting between 15 to 20 hours a week off of it, and we're making meals for several other community organizations as well. So it's just a multi-layered program that's just, there's so much good coming from it in multiple ways. So.
And Lisa and Nikki would love to hear a little bit more about what you have going on with Anoka-Ramsey as well.
Yeah, so Nikki, I can take this one. Being more of a commuter campus, our students, even in a normal time frame, right? Like they come and they tend to leave, and that's how we really organized our food pantry efforts. Is we would pick, so it's open. So we do like a more of a massive distribution about once a month when we kind of have identified when students tend to start running out of food, which we identified through the Boynton Health Survey actually helped inform us a lot of what our students are experiencing. And so we have during normal times, our food pantry would be open, and it actually became quite the campus production, to where a lot of people would volunteer. They would bring in fresh produce, they would donate to it, they would, you know, use their own time to help distribute the food to students, and then students would come through. And then the counselors also worked to make sure that we had resources available for students so that they could do sign up for SNAP, they could do sign up for different programs that would also help them. But now with COVID, we've really switched to having to do grab and go bags. Our campus is primarily closed for most things. We just have a smattering of classes that are still doing some in person. So we don't have a lot going on campus. And so we, the people that are running the food pantry, they have worked to put together these grab and go bags for students. And then they are right at the entrance. So when students can come in, pick one up and leave. They don't have to worry about navigating through campus, trying to find it. We've really tried to limit exposure on campus when students do come in. And so we are doing more of a grab and go type of a program at this point, which I think a lot of our sister community colleges are also doing with their food pantry, more of the grab and go. But our journey was a little bit different, and I wouldn't say we were late to the game, but yet we didn't really fully understand. We knew we had students in crisis. We had a crisis grant program that we, you know, Nikki mentioned, it takes a car repair, right, to kind of throw a student off. But then we had some wonderful AmeriCorps Vistas that came in to work with our campus to help us identify unmet need of our students, and this was one that rose to the top. And so I really have to give a shout out to America Vistas, who really helped us launch it, who went around, did all kinds of research, and helped us develop the program that we have, that we are looking to how can we kind of change it and further the work that we're doing in this area. But COVID kind of put a break on that, right? Like, how do we continue to offer food to our students to help meet the need, knowing that the need is probably increased now more than what it ever has before. So we're doing it through the grab and go.
And I think everybody on the panel has really touched on another piece of the pie, which is that connection to SNAP as a benefit for students. And I know both of your teams have been just really innovative and worked closely with Second Harvest Heartland to establish a partnership to make sure that students are not only know that they're eligible, but are getting that support through the process of application. Certainly something that we've seen from our end, is just an increase from other higher ed organizations reaching out. And you guys have been leading in that space for a long time. I would be curious from your perspective, what we can do to really reduce the stigma of seeking assistance, whether that's reducing that stigma of going to your campus food shelf or asking for help applying for programs like SNAP. So Nikki and Becca, maybe, and Lisa certainly jump in. I just would love to understand how can we make it easier for people to get connected to the support they're looking for.
Sure, I can contribute to that. Talking about stigma reduction is really important because the resources are there to help people. We just need to connect the students to the resources. So, we don't want stigma to be a barrier at all. I really appreciate how our food pantry on our campus was working prior to COVID. It's really run by our student engagement and activities office. So it's really run like any other event on campus. It's incredibly public. It's very out in the open. Nobody has to prove that they are in financial need. Sometimes faculty would bring their classes to the food campus cupboard, to kind of introduce this idea that it's okay to seek help and it's here for everybody. And there's always a good energy and a good buzz about it on campus when it was campus cupboard day. So I think that's important to just kind of normalize this idea that it is there for everybody. But then along with it, I do think it is also important to have people that can have private conversations, like counselors and things that can sit one-on-one with a student and just say, okay, what's the long term here? What can we do to help you more than just this bag of food for today? And what is it that you need and what are you experiencing and how can we support and help with that? So I think those are really important pieces of stigma reduction and talking about it as much as we can, just to normalize that this happens and there are resources for help, I think is really key.
Yeah, I think on our campus, that's exactly true. Same for us. We also have a lot of student leaders leading in this work, different student groups, and Nutritious You was student founded, student run. And our Swipe Out Hunger program and our student government is just really interested in this topic and really engaged in it. And I think that says something too, that your fellow peers are advocating for you as a student who's struggling. So I think that's been really helpful. And Nikki, like you talked about, I think it's making your programs open and aware and knowing that that's the kind of the thing that we do on our campus, and making sure that everyone on your campus, staff and faculty, know about them, so that in those one-on-one conversations, when a student's speaking with their advisor that they trust and that advisor shares a resource, then they know that it's something that they can trust and that they want to use. And of course, having delicious meals that Beth brings down every week, students can't hardly walk past that. So it's definitely a benefit.
Well, and that leads me, I have to ask, we know that these emergency programs, they're a much needed response to hunger on college campuses, but what else should schools be thinking about or doing to address student hunger?
Yeah, I think hunger, I think it's so important to understand that hunger is a symptom of other unmet need. So if we just limit ourselves to thinking that the only solution for hunger is just providing food, it really stifles how we can solve the root cause of the problem. And I think it's very important, like we've all talked about, and I think we've made it really clear, when these students are in crisis, they need these resources to get them through so that they can focus on their next class and have food in their stomach so that they can not worry about that and not be hungry while they're trying to get their degree. But I do think it's that campuses should be looking beyond these programs in addition to them, and trying to help prevent students from running out of money in the first place and prevent them from needing these crises programs. And that means, and it's complicated things, it means focusing on student wages and college affordability, financial aid and housing affordability, and all of those things, which like I said earlier, I get to kind of, to this group, I get to balance on both ends of the spectrum. One day I'm running a food pantry and helping hand out food to students. And then the next day I'm in meetings with administrators trying to think about how we can change a system or a process or a policy to make it easier for all students on the campus to meet their basic needs. So it's working up and down that spectrum of prevention on all different ends, but just, always challenging ourselves. What can we do next? How can we move upstream? How can we prevent this?
And Beth, I'm so impressed by the innovation out of your kitchen to connect to these other hunger relief efforts. I'd be curious as your perspective as well of what else schools can be doing, should be thinking about.
I think I have a good friend who teaches a class on campus. Her name is Jenny Breen, and she teaches a class on healthy foods, healthy lives, cooking on a student budget. And I think there's kind of a gap in education on food too. One thing I'm kind of curious about is, do people know how to cook in an efficient way and things like that? And educating ourselves on what we need to feed our families and things like that. I think what Jenny does, teaching how to get more vegetables into your food and into your meals and things like that are important things. But I think just what Becca was saying about kind of the root causes of hunger, with tuition and other things in place, that's where the most attention needs to be put. I think my end of things, I'm working more as the Band-Aid than the cure. I think right now with COVID, what the Campus Club is doing and, providing meals, providing nutrition, things like that, resources of that kind are hugely important, but it's not going to solve the problem. So I think, the School of Public Health and people like Becca and all the students that are really invested in this, really addressing issues of food justice, that's hugely important. So, it's a multi-layered approach, but the work that Becca is doing is, that's where the true solutions lie. So.
Well, I certainly want to make sure that we have some time to respond to some questions. I know we did receive one question in via email already, so I'll go ahead and get that one rolling to our panelists, and Elizabeth, jump in if there's other questions we've received here. So this question is from Jake in Inver Grove Heights, and he says, I always understood college to be the great equalizer. I thought we all lived in the same place and ate in the same place, and it was hard to tell who had money and who didn't. It sounds like that's no longer the case. Can the panelists help me understand why everyone can't just eat at the CAF and get free meals there?
Well, someone has to pay for those meals still. I understand that sentiment. I think a lot of us really thought that before we dove into this work. And it might have used to been that way, decades ago. It felt that way when the attendance to college students were mainly middle upper class white families, where your parents were paying for your tuition, and tuition was much less of a percentage of your family income than it is now. So just understanding again those policy changes. So in the 80s, the state government used to cover about 2/3 of the cost of tuition, and your family just had to cover 1/3. And today that's completely reversed. So more burden falling on the families. And then secondly, I just think it's really important to recognize the diversity that has come to campus and how campuses have changed. So today, college students are not majority that traditional college students, that 18 to 22-year-old with their parents paying their bills. Nikki, you touched on this a lot. It's a lot of student parents and families, students that might not be as connected to their families, or students from families that absolutely cannot afford to help them, whether they want to or not. So it's just a very different makeup of students on campus, and it's a very different landscape to afford tuition, room, and board. And then if they're living off campus, the rising cost of housing and living, everything that we're all facing as adults out in the community with rising rents, that's what students are facing too, with little to honestly no income at times.
So I would add to that, I think we have to like normalize that everybody's path in school is a little bit different, and everybody comes with a little bit, you know, of different responsibilities and expectations that they have outside of college. And oftentimes I hear students say, well, I have to take 15 credits a semester so I can finish in 4 years. But then they have this pressure to like, how do I work and take 15 credits a semester? It's too much to balance. You know, so we have to make it okay to say, it's okay if you're only taking, you know, 6 or 9 credits and you're just going part-time for a while. You're making progress towards your long-term goal while keeping your short-term goals in mind, that you're still going to be able to pay your bills and you're still going to be successful with managing your life while being successful in school. You know, everybody's path looks a little bit different, and it's like Rebecca said, it's just not how it used to be. It's just different for everybody.
I did get one question over a text while we were chatting, and somebody asks, there's one thing that you could tell a student right now, what would you share?
There's so many things that I would say to a student, but I think when I am working with students, I tell them that they're an individual, that they can't compare themselves to anybody else. They're like, kind of like Nikki was saying, their path is going to be different, and let's take a look at what their needs are and what needs to happen for them to be able to reach their goals, right? Knowing that their goals could be different than the goals of the person sitting next to them, and that's okay. I think there's so much expectation that students put on themselves to have to look a certain way, to have to achieve a certain thing, to have an image a certain way, and just to let them know that it doesn't have to be that way. You're an individual, and let's work with your situation and figure out what you want, what your goals are, and what you need to be able to get you there. And that is you are good enough. I think that's the thing. So many people just don't feel good enough because of their circumstances, and they are, because they're them, and that's okay.
And then I would certainly add in, you know, from, Nikki, I think you touched on it, Becca, you said something similar too, right? The resources are there. And so if somebody is kind of looking around saying, I don't know where to find resources around me, would certainly encourage people to check out toharvest.org/get help. You can find information about SNAP and how to connect with somebody from our team to help navigate. Are you eligible? How do you apply? Find your local food shelf, find those prepared meal sites, and then certainly if you're on campus, it sounds like we've got a couple of folks who can get you connected.
Great. And we just received another email question from Lila, who says she's a student. Can you speak to the long-term impact on learning for those living with hunger while studying?
Yeah, students. Oh, go ahead. Yes, students with food insecurity tend to have lower GPA, higher dropout rates, all of those negative things that you really don't want to see. So I do think that, yeah, this is a college achievement and a retention and graduation strategy as well. If you bring students onto your campus and you want them to graduate in 4 years and go on and be fruitful, helping them meet their basic needs is a very key component, not just helping them get into all those right classes, exactly what you were saying. I think Lisa, and Nikki, it's about what they can balance, but meeting those basic needs really helps them, not just in their health, but in their degree completion, which we know is a social determinant of health. So once you have a college degree, you tend to earn more and live longer, healthier lives. So I do think it's really important. That was a great question to tie it all together, why it matters, especially in higher education.
Wonderful. And we heard from a parent, Ginny, who has a child at the U. She says she's surprised to learn about this issue. How can I help my kids' campus tackle this?
I'll speak specifically to the U, and then I can give Anoka-Ramsey some time to say what they need. For us, monetary donations are always really great. We're on a phone call with Second Harvest, the food banks, and we purchase our food from food banks, which is how most food shelves run. I think Anoka-Ramsey said they get some donations, but maybe they do some purchasing too. And because of this great partnership, we get food at cost, extremely low cost. So I can get a jar of peanut butter for $1 and a can of tuna for 30 cents. So while food donations sometimes work, on a campus our size, we're serving, pre-COVID, we served an average of 800 students in a month. So it's hard to get enough donations every month to maintain that. So we're really thankful for our partnerships with food banks, where we can get that food at a very low cost, delivered right where we need it when we need it.
Yeah, so at Anoka-Ramsey, we do have staff and faculty and people who do donate the food, but we do also purchase the food as well. And our foundations for both of our campuses have been huge supporters of that. They actually provide the funds for us to be able to do that. So that is a way that our foundation boards who offer scholarships to students are also supporting our students, is by helping us purchase the food. So I would say either through donations or, of actual donating food, or through monetary donations to our foundation board is probably the best way to help if anyone was interested in helping out our students.
Yeah, we're seeing lots of interest via the chat about just sort of hearing how folks can pitch in. So that's wonderful to learn. We have run out of time together. Like I said to the panelists as we were prepping, we hope this is the beginning of a conversation, not a complete conversation. So please keep in touch. And thank you so much for all the good work you're doing. And thanks for being willing to share it with the community today. Thank you so much, everybody.